Well, here we are, guys. This is the last week before the AP exam, so we're really getting down to the nitty-gritty. So today, we're going to continue to walk through some of the most recent AP U.S. history questions, DBQs. So we're going to take one from a couple years ago, and we're going to look through the scoring of it. And so I'm going to show you guys some good examples and some bad examples. I'm also, oh, there you go, Raksha. Saving the dead frog in the, there you go. That's great stuff. So amphibians and music is that's just where it's at. So I'm going to try to make those connections for you guys here of here's how you can get these points. I'm going to try to do it in a really simple way to kind of give you some reminder tips on how to do that. And again, I'm going to show you some examples. But the first thing I want to do is I want to start off by showing you what that portal will look like when you log in to take the exam. Again, some students took an AP government exam yesterday. I saw that College Board put out that 98% of students didn't have any issues downloading or sending off their answers. So that's good. That's good news for us that it seems that it's been going pretty well so far. But I do want to kind of show you what that's going to look like because they do have a demo up at their website. So here is the agenda for today. So we're going to start off. I'm going to take you to that exam, the College Board page, and walk you through that demo. Then I'm going to show you the kind of simple steps as to how to answer the DBQ. And again, I'm going to kind of talk through some simple ways to remember those steps. Because again, right now, you guys might think, I know, we've been doing this for a couple of weeks. But when that timer's ticking, and there is going to be a timer at the bottom of your screen, sometimes that can stress you out. So I want to kind of give you guys kind of a checklist to go through so you don't freak out. And then I'm going to talk to you guys through some good examples and bad examples of essays from a DBQ from 2 years ago. So that is the plan for today. So let's first start off by, and then this is just that I've been putting this link on the emails. This is a College Board has the coronavirus updates for students. And so it looks like this at the top it tells you about this year's AP exam. When you scroll down, it says be prepared for exam day, and it's just this checklist. I'll click on that for a second so you guys can see. And again, I sent out in the email, please get on and confirm your email with College Board. They have to know that that is the email to send your e-ticket to, and they'll send you that e-ticket 2 days before the exam, and that's what you sign on with. Okay, that'll give you all the information to sign on, but you need to go and confirm your email address. So you need to do that as soon as possible. And then this kind of walks you through some of the other things that you can do in preparation for it. The other thing that they recommend is that you practice with this demo. And I'm just going to show you right now. Again, I encourage you guys to do that. They have a little video here of what it looks like. It explains to you here how to get your AP ID if you forgot. It gives you all of these steps here. Here's the interactive demo. So basically the day of the exam, you're going to go through, they're going to give you on your e-ticket this AP ID, which the one right now, let's just practice. Boom, they tell you that you've got, 10 minutes to complete this, or however much time till the test starts, and then you type in your first name, your last name, your date of birth. Now you guys are going to know how old I am. And then your email address, and you repeat your email address, and then do you allow them to send your scores to, colleges or universities? I accept terms and conditions. Boom, continue, and you move on. Okay. So it's telling me, and by the way, once you get in and do this, the exam is at 1 o'clock on Friday, so you need to start this at 12:30 on Friday. It'll have that running clock at the bottom for when the actual exam starts. So there's some things just really quick. Notice how quick that was. So that right there is the sign up. But that's all you have to do to sign into the exam. So as long as you have your AP your AP ticket that they're going to send you 48 hours before the exam, your e-ticket, they'll give you that code. You'll log in, sign in. You'll put that information in there, and then boom, you're ready to go. You're waiting for the exam to start. Okay, so again, that's pretty straightforward, but they ask you to get on there 30 minutes before just in case they're backed up. So I would ask you guys to do that as well to make sure that you're logged in to make sure that you're there and you're prepared and you're ready to go. So one of the other things that I would do in preparation, and I'm going to wait this clock out for a second so you guys can see what the next steps look like, is we're going to talk about this throughout the week, but I sent you guys that graphic organizer of each of the time periods and each of the themes. I think it's very, very worthwhile to go through and put as many specific pieces of evidence into that graphic organizer so that you have things, you put your thoughts together. So if they ask you a question about World War I or about slavery or about the Constitution, that you know what happened in that time period, that you have some things right off the top of your head that you're going to be ready to go in. So I think that is some great ways to study the content here at these last minutes. Again, I also think that if you want to watch some of our old videos, but also some of John Green's old videos and some of the other AP history prep people, if you want to watch some of their stuff, that's fine. I think it's great to continue to take those notes of here in this period this happened, in this period this happened again. That's why I try to give you guys that graphic organizer to keep that straightforward. But anything that you can put together along those time periods, I think is particularly great. The next thing that we're going to talk about, man, this 3 minutes seems to take a while, doesn't it, guys? It's funny how much time goes slow when you're actually waiting for it to run out. I do want you to at least see what this looks like, though. So I'm going to go ahead and wait this out for a second. And I guess I'll go ahead and give this warning, and I hope you guys didn't do this. Don't even think about this kind of stuff. But so College Board did put out over the weekend that they already invalidated a lot of students because they got wind of some kind of cheating scheme. And so they already are not going to be allowed to even sit for the test. So again, it's really not worth it because College Board also turns those students' information in to college admissions as well. So you sure don't want to do that. So just let me kind of give that warning again. And I hope none of you guys would be seriously considering doing that. But again, you don't want to be trying to cheat on the exam or anything like that. And again, trying to cheat, I mean, having somebody else write it for you or something like that. You don't want to engage in anything like that. But again, the exam is going to be open. I mean, it's open book, open note, but the reality is, guys, you're not going to have time to do that. I mean, you're going to have to really have everything at the ready. The 45 minutes is going to go by really quickly. If you don't really have things in your head ready to go, you're not going to have enough time. You're just really not. So again, I think that the prep work of going over the graphic organizer, having your thoughts together, having things on the ready to include there, and then boom, when those documents hit, you're ready to move through them and you're ready to go, I think is essential. That's been the biggest concern I have, is just the limited amount of time already on a DBQ. Even though they shortened the number of documents, it's still going to go by really, really fast. Okay, so 3, 2, 1. When exam time starts, you'll have this pop up on your screen. You'll hit continue. And then it should take me, okay. Should be taking us forward into, hold on. Okay, well, maybe it's not going to. No, it's starting my timer all over again. Sorry, guys. So, yeah, then it sends you into, again, it doesn't actually send you off the screen. It opens that up, and then the questions will pop up, and you'll get your prompt there. So I don't know why I didn't do it at that time. But that's, again, I think pretty straightforward for you guys. So now I'm going to walk through, let's take the high-level view of what are my tips for the exam, like what are the high-level tips. The first thing is you need to make sure you read the prompt very carefully. I know I use this example all the time, but I have read AP essays where they give a great answer, but it's not a direct answer to what the question was. The example I use a lot is, I had a question one year about how the bubonic plague spread. I saw a student that wrote this great essay about how it started, the origins of it. And again, they got no credit because the question wasn't about how it started or the causes. The questions were really about the consequences of it. The student really didn't address that. So again, you've got to make sure that as you're reading the prompt, I would ask you, first of all, what are they asking you? Are they asking you to compare something? Are they asking you how much something changed over time or how it stayed the same over time? Those are going to be really your two most likely categories they're going to ask you. Compare and contrast, or continuity or change over time. That's really what they're probably going to ask you from an essay standpoint. So make sure you figure that out. Next, do they give you categories? Did they say what are the political and social differences? Did they list them up? Did they not? Did they say, you know, compare and contrast these two events, and they let you pick the categories? If they choose the categories for you, if they say social and economic, there you go. There's your two categories, social and economic. If they didn't, you need to come up with them. And again, you guys, hopefully we've covered this quite a bit where you've got them on the ready. Social, economic, cultural, religious, racial, gender, any of the trade, any of those type of categories, and the themes that I again have on that graphic organizer, I think are all great ways to categorize that information. And then the last part, the time period. You need to make sure that you see what is the time period they've given you. And you need to make sure that you see that if it's a weird year, and again, I always say, guys, if it's 1941, okay, they're probably picking that because that's when Pearl Harbor happened. And they didn't want you to talk about World War II post when America got involved. So if it's one of those off years, if it's not something like 1900 or 1850, there's probably a reason they picked that weird year. So you really need to rack your brain to figure out what was going on at that time. Why did they do that? And make sure that your answers all fall within that time limit, okay? So that's also going to be very important. You don't want to start pulling information from way outside of there because that's not going to count for you, okay? Next, once you've gotten that, once you've gotten your bearings, it's time to go through the documents. You need to go through them quickly. Again, remember our HIP analysis. Again, I've tried to attach that to all of our emails. It's a historical context, the intended audience, the purpose, and the point of view. Those are great things to think in the back of your head as you're reading over them. And now again, does that mean that you can find one of those, all of those for every source? No, probably not. But for the most part, you should be able to identify those things as you're looking through the sources. And what I would tell you to do, and it's what you guys have seen me do every time we do these, I would have a sheet of paper right here, and I would be writing document 1, and I would be jotting down some notes real quick as I'm reading over it. Okay, and so what you need to be thinking is, first of all, did any of those things stand out to you? Purpose, to me, is the easiest thing to figure out, right? Like, what's the purpose? What's the intent behind this document? So if the other ones are a struggle, you can always fall back on that. What is the reason behind, what's the main idea here, okay? And then you need to be grouping them. And again, remember, it's probably going to be 2 groups. You're going to do compare, so similar or different. You're going to do changes or things that stayed the same. So those are really going to split themselves into 2 categories rather easily. And then also remember the social, economic, religious. So again, you need to be stacking them into those categories so that you can then plug them into your essay rather quickly. Once you've done that, so now you've read through them all, you've analyzed them all, you've grouped them as you went. Now it's time to develop your DBQ. First thing that you want to do, remember, you're going to start with contextualization. So the one we're going to do today is from 2018. So here is the prompt. Evaluate the relative importance of different causes for the expanding role of the United States in the world in the period 1865 to 1910. So the relative importance of different causes for the expanding role of the United States. So they're going to give you a list of causes, and you're going to have to tell which ones are most important. Okay, so you're going to need to categorize whatever causes they've given you here. They didn't give you categories. You're going to have to come up with the categories. Okay, so let's jump back over here to what we're talking about, opening with contextualization. So first of all, my first 2 to 3 sentences need to be something about what happened before that time period. What happened before 1865? Well, 1865 is a really kind of odd year. They chose it because it's right after the Civil War. Okay, so in 1865, so they're saying after the Civil War, what happened? So what would be a great way to explain is what just happened before. Using the Civil War, country split in two. You had the North and the South. They fought in this great Civil War. 400,000 people died. But what was significant afterwards is now you have one unified country under one unified government, the United States of America. So now that we have this unification, the United States is trying to develop their foreign policy in relation to Great Britain and France, countries that they have allied with and been at war with in the past. Anything along those lines would be good contextualization. Again, I'm explaining what happened before, but I also want to point something out. I'm explaining what happened before in relation to the prompt. I'm explaining what happened, but notice you want to make sure that you then bring it back to what the prompt is. I'm telling you about all these things because they affected the way the United States viewed itself in relation to now it's time to view ourselves as one whole country in relation to other countries. So now we got to figure out how do we interact with those other countries. So again, that type of explanation is going to be needed there in your contextualization. So you have that there. Then you jump into your thesis statement. X, however, A, B, therefore Y. So again, X and A, B are going to be our body paragraphs. So those are going to be the causes, right? They're going to be the main cause. They're going to be the next cause and then the following cause. So again, they're having us evaluate them, so we need to rank them, okay? So then we'll just put them there, therefore Y. So the therefore statement would be something along the lines of, therefore, there were multiple causes that caused that corresponded to the United States expanding its role in the world. So again, we really restated that was already there for us. Next, we move into body paragraph 1. Okay, so that is X. Then we have body paragraph A, and then body paragraph B. So one of the things that we want to make sure that we do is include outside evidence at some point, okay? So we're grouping the evidence. So let's say, and we're going to look at some examples of this here in a second. We've got examples there that will be for this cause, okay? So we might say that a cause was imperialism, okay? So that'll be a paragraph. We might say that there was an economic or a religious reason for the expanding role too. So we've grouped all of those things together. We're also going to have to look outside of the sources they have and recommend another one. So that's where we can say, we remembered this additional source, blah, 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 that shows this as well. And again, you want to be really specific with that. So we want to include the outside evidence as well. Last paragraph, 3 to 5 sentences explaining what happens next. So we talked about America expanding its role till 1910. What happens after 1910 is World War I. So we need to explain why the United States felt the need to engage in World War I, and then you could even move on into and then engage in World War II. So that's my really high overview of the different parts of the exam. Again, I think that sounds like a lot, but once you start moving through it, I hope that all of this kind of rings a bell. I hope that, you know, that we've done this enough and talked over enough that wasn't like a surprise, anything I've said there. So before we move into the examples, are there any questions about just my general overview? And again, I'm going to keep kind of going over this every day so that, again, just this step-by-step process is in your head. Because again, maybe it's all like, you got it, you remembered it. But also, I think, again, the day of the exam, sometimes, you know, you can get a little nervous. So I want to make sure that you guys feel comfortable with that. So we're good on kind of just the general outline, general overview. Okay. So let's dig into this for a second. And I'm just going to kind of show you this question, and then I'm going to show you the responses. So we just went over the prompt, and let's just look over some of these sources. So the first source is this treaty, okay? It's part of the Treaty of the Secession of Russian Possessions by North America. This is in 1867. This is just after the Civil War. Next one, again, this was something that we talked about a lot there in that time period, is Josiah Strong's Our Country is Possible, Future and Its Present Crisis. Remember, he's one of the guys that really pushes for the religious reasons for expanding, that you want to convert people. So that would be a big reason why you would do this. Next, you have Alfred Thayer Mahan, part of his book, The Interests of America in Sea Power, Present and Future, and this is in 1897. If you guys remember him, he made the argument that whoever controls the seas is going to control the world. So America, you need to build a big navy because that's who's going to win the next war. So he was pretty before his time there. Again, y'all probably remember this political cartoon. I've used this one before in some assignments. You got Uncle Sam there. He's playing with his beard. And there's a waiter there, and the waiter's actually representing President McKinley. And he says, well, I hardly know which of these to take first. So he's like ordering dinner, but if you look closely at the menu, it says Cuba steak, Puerto Rico pig, Sandwich Islands. So he's trying to figure out what country he wants to eat, right? So this is an imperialist cartoon. Then next we have part of I think this is a letter from John Hay, the Secretary of State, to these representatives. We have that there in 1900. And another political cartoon, again, I've used this in an assignment with you guys before, where you've got Uncle Sam with a school teacher and a military man, and he's saying, take your choice, I have plenty of both. And he's saying this to the Filipinos, it says. So yeah, there's just a few. I don't think we need to go down through anymore. I told you guys there's a part of a Teddy Roosevelt speech. But just remember, you're only going to have 5 on this exam, so I don't need to show you all 11 there. So again, that's about as many sources as you'll have. You need to quickly assess each of them as you go, again, using that HIP analysis. So then the next thing I want us to do is take a look here at how did some students answer this question. So first of all, College Board does this after every exam. It takes a few months, but then they show you. They go, hey, here's how we scored this. Here's why we scored it this way. Here's some examples of good answers, and here's some bad answers. So first of all, they showed you, here are some things. So they went through those documents, and they gave you a summary. So that first document I looked at, they said, hey, this is Russia ceding territory to North America. This is the Russians' territory is going to be returned back to them. And so what would have been a proper analysis of that document, right? So what did they call a proper analysis of it? So here's some examples. They said, you could have said something like, the United States' efforts to acquire Alaska and to remove the presence of foreign powers in North America continued long-standing policies of Western expansion. Okay, so what are you doing? That was a historical context. You're saying like, look, this was just part of a bigger thing that was us trying to continue to expand across the country. And this is us using Alaska as doing that. So that's historical context. Another example they gave was foreign nations viewed the U.S. as a more important international power as a result of the treaty. Again, that's the audience. That's who he was saying that to, the intended audience. So he was saying that to other countries. This is showing other countries that from now on, we want to be in control of these territories. So again, that's some of their examples for what would be good analysis. Let's see what they say about Our Country by Josiah Strong. They said the summary was, it argues that with the reduced amount of unoccupied territory, races for land will soon begin. Okay. And he says that he thinks Anglo-Saxon religion and culture have particular merit and deserve to control more land. Again, remember, because of his religious beliefs, he thinks that more people need to be controlled by them, and so they could be brought into their religion. So what would good analysis of that be? Advocates of the United States imperialism promoted ideas about racial competition and the superiority of Anglo-Saxon. Yeah, that's a point of view, right? That told you what the point of view was of the person writing this. Another example, many Americans perceive themselves to be in a world competition with other countries around the world for the acquisition of colonial possessions. Okay, that's historical context, right? They're telling you, like, this is what's been going on. Last example they give is Strong sought to impress on American leaders the need to acquire more lands and resources. Okay, that's the purpose. That's what they wrote this for. He was trying to explain to people that that's what they need to do. So again, I hope that helps. Let me go ahead and skip to the political cartoon part. So the William McKinley is the waiter, and Uncle Sam is the guy looking at the menu there. Some good analysis, they said, would be The United States engaged with Spain in the Spanish-American War over control of islands in Spanish possession. That's historical context. You're explaining what's going on at this point. The Spanish-American War is. Something else they said that would be good. The cartoonist portrayed McKinley as serving the interests of the United States imperialists by acquiring these lands in the Far East and Caribbean regions. It's point of view. Again, that would be very accurate, just to say what the cartoonist meant by this. Let me do the cartoon one where you got the school teacher and the military guy. So they said it's a cartoon depicting that the United States is offering soldiers and school teachers of the Philippines, suggests the United States was willing to use both military force and education to help gain power. And so their two examples of good analysis were the United States sought to project power overseas by retaining the Philippines as a colony, provoking a Filipino independence movement and insurgency against the U.S. occupation. Historical context, okay, that's all that was. It was just explaining what's going on there by trying to get those colonies. The next one, it says the cartoonist depicted Uncle Sam as an imperialist, giving the Filipinos a choice on how they would like to be conquered, peacefully or through military means. It's point of view. Okay, so again, I wanted to walk you through some of their examples of analysis. And again, I want you to notice, I hope that you're looking at that going, okay, that's really not that hard. That's what we've been working on. That's what we've been doing. Again, the HIP analysis I don't think is particularly tricky. Again, I just want you to very quickly get to that point where you're making that kind of assessment over each of the documents. All right, so now I want to show you guys their example of a good thesis and a bad thesis, okay? Again, they have here the explanation of what is a good thesis. Okay, well, how do they score that? Response is earning 1 point by responding to the prompt with historically defensible claim that establishes a line of reasoning about the topic. To earn the point, the thesis must make a claim that responds to the prompt rather than simply restating or rephrasing the prompt. The thesis must suggest at least one main line of argument development or establish analytical categories of the argument. Okay, again, do you see why we use the thesis formula? Because notice, we give a line of argumentation, we give our categories, and we do more than simply restating the prompt. So boom, we follow our thesis formula, we should absolutely get 1 point. But let's look at an example here. This is a good thesis. This is literally one a student wrote and got full credit 2 years ago. While some historians may argue that the U.S. desire to expand its role in the world was due to the fact that the U.S. felt it was its duty to civilize nations and act as a global police, the most important reason for America expanding its role in the world can be attributed to its competition with Europe over global influence, its desire to expand its economy through trading opportunities, and the U.S. ideal of manifest destiny. Okay, so they didn't follow like our thesis formula, but they absolutely gave categories, and they made a very clear argument that they were going to continue to follow. So that would have gotten them the point. Let's look at the next one. It says, the country was doing this for a few reasons, such as expanding its territory, manifest destiny or imperialism, preserving its national interests, such as trading with China, and helping other nations. That's it. And I told you guys before that, you know, sometimes I can get a little wordy in my theses, but that's a really short thesis statement. And they're saying that is a really good thesis. Doesn't have to be long, just has to set up their categories and make an argument. Okay, so again, I don't ever want you guys to think that they have to be these really wordy thesis statements. That they really don't. But let me show you two bad examples. Here's an example that they said would not have got the point. Due to this, America began to embark on an imperialistic mission in the later half of the 1800s in the name of social, economic, and political necessities. Now, they gave categories, but they did not show a line of argument development. They didn't, you know, you don't know, I mean, you could say that about anything, right? You could say, well, they're social, economic, and political. You didn't even start a line of argumentation. So they don't see where you're going. They don't see that you've developed anything. So you've got to give them more than that. It's too generic and not specific enough to that time. You could say that by any time. Okay, so that's a little too less. The other example they gave that was bad was different causes and events had a major importance in expanding the role of the U.S. in the world. Okay, it just basically restated what the prompt was, right? I mean, it just said, yeah, there's different causes that did this. Okay, well, you've got to give more than those two. Okay, so those are examples of it not being good. Okay, again, I hope the thesis statement, I think you guys feel comfortable with that. I'm gonna try to throw a lot of thesis statements at you guys throughout the year. So I hope that that's something that you're comfortable with. Let's talk now about contextualization. Okay, again, I've told you to put it at the beginning, and I've told you to put it at the end. I want you to look at what they said would be good contextualization. They said, look, you could talk about the Civil War and its impact on the United States' role in the world. They said you could talk about international competition to establish colonies and maintain empires. They said that it would have been good to talk about the increasing United States industrialization and its desire to develop new markets for goods. So that would be a good answer. And then last, they said you could talk about the closing of the frontier in 1890. You could talk about, you know, the closing of the frontier is created this desire to gain more land. So any of those, they said, look, those are 4 good examples of what you could put in context. By the way, they're not saying those are the only ones you can use. They're saying those are some they identified, but that's not a complete list. So again, just some examples they're throwing at you so you can kind of see what would be good. So let's now take a look at an acceptable contextualization. So I'm going to read through this for you. In the aftermath of the war, internationally, the world was changing. Europe was slicing up Africa. Many countries started fighting for their independence, and the fight for influence and money ensued between the most powerful nations. During the time periods of 1865 to 1900, the U.S. sought to keep up with Europe and expand its sphere of influence in the world under the leadership of Roosevelt, McKinley, and the other presidents. I'm going to give you a few examples of why that was really good. First of all, I talked about those bigger other things that they mentioned earlier, but notice how specific they were. They mentioned Europe, Africa, fighting wars of independence. They talked about under the leaders, Roosevelt and McKinley. Again, that is, I mean, I know you're going, well, that's not super specific, but it's specific enough. They gave you a list of other countries, and they gave you a list of the leaders who thought that way. That is very specific in regards to how they're going to grade that. Okay, so that's all we're talking about. Let me count how many sentences that was. I think it was just 2 sentences. That was just 2 sentences. Okay, so, I mean, that's why I put here in the little guide here, I said you should start off opening paragraph 2 to 3 sentences of contextualization. Then I said at the end 3 to 5 sentences. Honestly, that's if you have time. That's your last paragraph. That's the last thing you're doing. I would try to get 3 to 5, but you know, I think that's a little safer for you. But you know, I think you could do it 2 to 3. It's just going to be a matter of how much time you have there at the end of the exam if you're writing that last paragraph. So let's look at one that's not acceptable. Okay, a failed attempt at contextualization. By the way, it always cracks me up when I do this because I always think it would be really funny if I was like going over one and it was like one that somebody did, like one of my students, and they didn't get points for it. When I used to do that more, I don't remember, Ashley, I don't think I did it with you guys. I used to do that a lot where I would take students in class and I would do that and I would read them back to them and tell them, like, this is a good example, this is a back, and I wouldn't say the names. But then I kept having students who were like, it embarrassed me. I was like, well, I didn't even say your name. But anyway, so I kind of quit doing that. But I always think it's funny that what if we were like the national good or bad example. But we'd be the good example, right? We wouldn't be a bad example. All right, so here's their bad example of unacceptable contextualization. Throughout all of American history, the debate over whether or not to create alliances with foreign countries continues to be prominent. Documents such as Washington's Farewell Address or the Monroe Doctrine warned against these alliances. However, towards the end of the 1800s, America began to engage in foreign countries through alliances or attempting to imperialize other nations. They said they did not give credit for this because it says, this example does not earn credit because it is historically inaccurate in asserting that the Monroe Doctrine warned against alliances. And it is not a trend or development that influenced imperialism of the late 19th century. Okay, so what they're saying is, number one, you're like, that's not what that document said. Number two, you tried to connect Washington in a really clumsy way to something that ended up happening, over 150 years later. And I mean, not to say that's impossible. And guys, I've kind of warned you about this before. Like, you can argue, like, okay, you and I can sit here and have this like argument all we want. I mean, we could say that somehow Christopher Columbus caused coronavirus, right? I mean, like, we could make some like argument that because he came to America, he mixed these parts of the world, whatever, right? I mean, we could like have fun with some like kind of out there argument. Do not do that on the AP exam, okay? You want very direct argumentation. Like, you want to show what happened right before this that led up to that. Again, I hope you guys don't hear me as saying like, I do that a lot. And I've probably done that with you guys where I'm like, hey, it's kind of crazy to think about. Like, if this wouldn't have happened 300 years ago, then this might not have happened. Okay. But when you do that on the exam, they think that you're just full of crap. They think that you don't know anything else. So you're just like connecting this one random thing. I had a student like my first year that she could literally connect just about everything to the Mongols. Like, she just like had this like that was like her thing. It's like, I'm basically going to connect everything to the Mongols. It's like, that's cool, but don't do that on the exam, right? Like, don't like try to turn whatever they ask you into, I'm going to answer it about the Mongols. Like, don't do that. So again, you want to, in your head, I always say 20 to 30 years. Contextualization needs to be 20 to 30 years before and 20 to 30 years after on the APUSH exam. On the world history exam, I told you guys y'all could do it could be bigger, but on this one, it needs to really be 20 to 30 years. Once you get beyond that, they start questioning if you're just throwing some stuff out there at them, okay? So that's their examples of good and bad contextualization. How we feel about that? Does that make sense as to why they did not get the point there? Nice. Okay, let's talk about how they use the evidence. Okay, so so there's multiple points you can get from using the evidence. So first of all, you need to address the prompt by using at least 3 documents there. So it's at least 2 documents on this AP exam. Okay, so they shrunk that down to 2. So to earn 1 point, the response must accurately describe, not just quote or paraphrase, content from at least 3 of the documents to address the prompt. Now remember, we're just using, to get that first point, we just have to do 2. One thing you have to be careful of is you do not quote the prompt directly, okay? Like, they gave you the prompt, so they know you can like literally just like regurgitate it. So you need to put it in your own words, and you need to accurately describe it, okay? So here's an example of that being done well. Document 6 depicts Uncle Sam. Its purpose is showing the U.S. having control over the country, trying to seem generous when it actually isn't. And they said, this example describes evidence from the documents relevant to the topic, so it contributes toward the first evidence point. But it does not use evidence to support an argument about the cause of expanding the United States to the world, so it does not contribute to the second point. I'll deal with that in a second. But notice, they gave their purpose. So if you give the historical context, intended audience, purpose, point of view, boom, you're going to get 1 point. Okay, let's look at one that is not good. Document 6 is the effect of document 2, where the whites were trying to get other people to share the wonders of Christianity, albeit in a slightly conventional way. It says, this example does not contribute towards describing evidence from the documents related to the topic, because it misinterprets the document and is confused. I mean, I was about to say, I don't even know for sure what that means. So yeah, that's confusing, and it's definitely not an accurate portrayal of document 6. So make sure you're clear, make sure you're to the point. Now, to get the second point, you have to make sure not only are you describing the source using its historical context, its intended audience, purpose, or point of view. Just one of those, by the way. You don't got to do all of them. Just do one of those for each document. But you have to tie it back to the topic or prompt. Okay, simply saying, yeah, I know the purpose of this document, but never connecting it back to what they're asking you will give you 1 point, but it won't give you 2. So let's look at an example of how you do that. Okay, so here's a good example. However, social causes were also a factor in the practice of American imperialism. There was seen through the application of social Darwinism to a global scale. Many felt that the Anglo-Saxon were a more fit race than any to expand and Christianize and civilize the rest of the world. Document 2. This example connects, and this is their explanation, this example connects Strong's inferred social Darwinism to the cause of U.S. expansion. Yeah, I mean, he explained why this made the United States want to expand. That is the prompt. So that would get them that additional point. Not only did they explain it, they also connected it to the prompt itself. Okay, so that's just a good rule of thumb that you always want to use HIP, but then you always want to make sure that you're using that in connection with the prompt itself. Okay. Last point is they're going to ask you, you can get up to 2 points. So originally it was 1. On this one, they will give you 2 points for evidence beyond the documents. So you need to come up with 2 pieces of evidence in addition to what they've given you to explain your thesis. So they give you a list here, and notice it's a pretty big list. I mean, like, look, it goes on and on. Social Darwinism, manifest destiny, dollar diplomacy, white man's burden, Teddy Roosevelt's foreign policy, big stick diplomacy. I mean, there's just a lot. I mean, like, usually they give you like 30 different things students could use. And again, they're just saying, hey, these are some examples. You could actually use other ones too. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to come up with two things that they did not say that explain the point you're making. So let me show you a good example. Do what? Let me show you a good example though. Newspapers had risen in popularity among the public. A majority who could read, and many companies competed to attract the public's attention. Yellow journalism created outrageous attitudes with dramatized accounts of Spanish mistreatment of the Cuban. Okay, so notice what they did there. They added in yellow journalism. So that was something they added in there, and notice they tied it all back. They said yellow journalism created outrageous attitudes with dramatized accounts. So they explained to you, so, okay, here's what yellow journalism is, and by the way, it contributed to this because it made people think the Spanish were treating the Cubans worse than they really were. So again, that's a great piece of outside evidence. So then they give you one that was just wrong. Okay, they give you one talking about the Missouri Compromise. Really, there's no connection there. Okay, so you need to use 2 of those. And again, that's why I keep coming back to that historical graphic organizer that I gave you earlier a few weeks ago. Because again, if you can just get as many items in there as you can, so when they give you a question about the Civil War or World War I, World War II, you've got all these other things in your head. So when they give you some sources, you use those sources, but then you have those other ones ready to go as well. Because that's going to be a way. I mean, 2 points, it's out of 10 points, the exam. So 2 points are obviously a big deal. So you can get 2 for adding those in there. And then the last thing they have on here is they give more examples of the purpose, historical context, and ways to do that. I mentioned this at the very beginning of the call when I think it was just Ashley and I on here, but I'm gonna mention this now. There's a point that if you go online, people always freak out about, and it's called a point for complexity. I don't want you to freak out about it, but it is hard to get. I think I shouldn't tell you this. I think like 0.4 people who take the test get complexity. So it is hard to get. I do want to tell you about it because I think you could absolutely get it. It's just not easy to do, especially I think with this time crunch, it would be difficult, but I do want to explain it to you. And I want to tell you, I mean, I wouldn't buy into kind of the freak out about, oh, it's so hard to get or whatever. I mean, you don't have to have it to get a perfect score. So, I mean, I don't think it's the end of the world to not get it. So I wouldn't worry about it, but I wouldn't worry about it being too hard. But again, I do want to give you an example of how you can get it. Okay, so here's how their explanation is. Let me see if they give you one over the top. The response demonstrates a complex understanding using evidence to corroborate, qualify, or modify an argument that addresses the question. So what you could do here is, again, you're going to have to use some nuance. So you're going to have to either show that yes, the United States expanded, but it didn't expand here. Or yes, it expanded, but then during this point in time, it didn't expand. Or it expanded in this way, but not in this way. Or it expanded kind of like Europe did, but not like Asia did. So you're going to have to show some nuance, some explanation that, yeah, I'm talking about America expanding, but there's also some differences here in the way it expanded. It wasn't universal. It's not like it expanded in everything the same way. Let me give you an example. The U.S. took many efforts to try to assimilate the Filipinos to make them have the same political and societal views as they did. This reflects the ongoing trend of that time of racial superiority, which is synonymous with how the U.S. treated new free slaves. However, despite the imposing negative shadow the U.S. cast over conquered lands due to nationalism, this feeling came from a sense of morality and genuine care for other people. So what they did was, again, they didn't really ask you about that in here, right? They said, what were the causes for expanding? So you list out your causes, and while you're talking about one of those explanations, you say, yeah, it's like another country, it's like these other countries did, except in this one way. And what that did was that showed that you understood the complexity of the point you were making. And they like to give you the opportunity to show that because it's a really higher level historical thinking skill. I mean, it's easy to say things like, yeah, the United States got bigger, or yeah, they got more aggressive militarily, or blah, blah, blah. It's really hard to say, yes, they did in these examples, but they also did not in this example. So that's how you can create that complexity, and you can do that anywhere. Okay, you can do that at any point in time, in your essay. So I'll talk about that kind of sparingly as we go. But again, I don't spend a lot of time on it because it is really, really hard to get. And if we were in class every day, I would probably spend more time on it. Well, I know I would spend more time on it. But if there's something in your wheelhouse, if you're reading it and you're like, oh, but this is a great example, like a counter example, boom, use it. Okay, so I will continue to show you that this week. And if you guys have any questions on that, feel free to ask me about it. Like I said, it really requires a nuance that I think all of you can absolutely do, but just the time. I really think the reason that a lot of students don't even attempt to get that is just because you're running out of time and you don't have time to get into that kind of nuance in an essay like that. So, but yeah, that right there, I just walked through how to get all the points on the exam. So that's from 2 years ago. That's still up. You can still get on there and read it. And that's what I'm going to do tomorrow and Thursday as well. So I hope that was helpful. Are there any questions here at this point for me, guys, before I kind of bring this to an end, and I'll kind of tell you a little bit about the next couple of days before the exam?
Yeah, I gotta go in a bit, but I have a question. So are you gonna be able to see our answers, like, after we've submitted them?
Yes.
Crap, okay.
That is like the shadiest question I've ever heard.
I just need to know because my answer is probably gonna be dumb. Like, I'm just gonna warn you right now.
Girl,
Okay.
the
Your
fact
answer
that you
can't be
said
dumb
that
if
your
you just
answers
don't take
might be
it.
dumb is a complete lie, girl.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna say you're gonna have to try really hard to make your answer dumb, Raksha. So I don't believe that at first. But number two, just do. I mean, honestly, do as best you can. But yes, I will say they are sending them all to the AP teacher of record. So what I'll have to do, yeah, I haven't gotten the weeds on this, but that's one of their precautions is they got to send them to me, and I have to sign off that appears to be similar to your prior work. Yeah. So I have to do that. Yeah. But Roxy, you're gonna be fine. I mean, again, I am gonna talk tomorrow and Thursday, kind of just to tell you for the rest of the week. I'm gonna kind of make some predictions on what I think they might ask you. That doesn't mean like I'm Nostradamus and I know for sure, but like I always do that because you can somewhat tell they're not going to ask you about exactly what they asked the last few years. So that kind of takes some things off the table. So you can probably guess if they haven't talked about economics in 3 years, they're probably going to ask an economic. If they haven't talked about war, if they haven't talked about like the gender differences, like there's some pretty good ways to kind of narrow it down to probably 2 or 3 themes. I'm sure they probably don't like us saying that, but I mean, you can kind of reasonably guess that they're not going to ask the same question back-to-back years. So anyway, I'm going to kind of walk through that too as we go in the next couple of days. But again, just do as best you can. I get it. It's been a different year. It's been a difficult year. So yeah, just do it. I mean, there's no. I think you guys will do fine, but there's no. I don't think you should go into it with fear of not getting it. I think if any year people understand that, this would be the year. But I'm confident in you guys and in your ability to do that. And you passed it last year, Raksha. So
Yeah, we're not going to talk about that.
But yeah, is there any other questions for me there? And by the way, like I said, you guys do what?
How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm ready to see how you guys all do. I will say, and if you guys need help this week, kind of like last minute stuff, you guys just holler at me. And like I said, if we need to do an additional time this week or something for me to jump on with some of you guys, I don't even mind. You know, like I said, if you guys if a couple of you are taking the exam, if you just want to get on a quick Zoom with me one day and talk through something for 15 minutes or so, I mean, I can work that into my schedule. So y'all feel free to reach out to me if you'll need any of that this week. Okay.